everybody. I have Patrick and McQueen again in the house. And this time we are going to talk about short-term rental laws, changes, and things you need to know. So if you're a real estate agent, stay tuned. And if you are somebody that currently owns a house in one of these cities that we're going to talk about, make sure you listen up because there are going to be some changes. Some of them are good. Some of them are interesting. Right, Patrick?
Totally agree. Thanks for having me.
As always. All right, let's start with Sedona. Tell me what's going on in Sedona.
Well, it seems to always be something, right? We've seen groups of homeowners who record deed restrictions against other groups of homeowners and claim that they had the authority to do that, and that creates litigation. But what we're seeing now is an action by the city itself, by the city of Sedona. I don't know exactly how this letter got distributed. I think it was by regular mail, but there was a letter that was distributed to many, many homeowners within the city of Sedona. And that letter basically outlined why short-term rentals may not be favorable to certain people and what you can do if you're a resident and an owner of property in the city to make it so that your house is never used as a short-term rental. And so what the city did was they sent this letter out outlining the position about short-term rentals and then including a deed restriction that a person could sign and record, restricting their property basically forever against any subsequent owner ever using the property as a short-term rental. So it was pretty eye-opening to a lot of people, pretty shocking to a lot of people to actually see a city going through this. And it brings up all sorts of potential legal issues, I think, for the ability to send out a letter like that.
Do you have any idea about how many people have signed it and had it recorded?
I don't think there's been that many. I think there's been maybe 40. I read an article from the city or from the publication that reports on Sedona, and it was 35 to 40 or something like that that had reported it. I'm also aware that there's been some correspondence sent by a number of real estate agents and brokerages and others involved in short-term rentals and the real estate market in general, who've sent letters to the city saying, hey, what are you doing here? You can't do this.
Well, and not only just for the current homeowner, but when that person decides to sell the house, I wonder about the future impact if now there's a deed restriction that says, hey, potential buyer, you can never rent this house out as a short-term rental because of the deed restriction. Like, I just wonder if people are really thinking that through and the potential impact to the value of the home. Would the home be worth less because it has the deed restriction on it? I think, gosh, it's kind of crazy.
And then, you're recording you're a lender, you're recording a document. Right. Did you get lender's approval to do this, to restrict your property like this? Because if the lender ever has to take over that property, then they can't, then they may be stymied with a valuation issue as well. So, it was really interesting. And I don't even know if you can really give a deed like deed restrictions are more like neighbors, like, hey, us group of neighbors, we agree not to have horses in our backyard or whatever, however we want to restrict our property. Granting one in favor of the city seems a little weird. I don't know that that's even lawful, but assuming it is, there's the potential that it violates, state law that says cities and towns can't really regulate in that regard. Is it sort of kind of, you get this official business letter from the city and you're like, oh, okay, I'm going to sign what they want me to sign.
Yeah.
Going
back to the financing, this is a really big deal because, so if you live in Sedona, you have a home, you receive this letter and you have a loan on your house now, a home loan on your house. That home loan is likely in first lien position. So let's say that that's the case. And you say, yeah, I'm going to do this deed restriction. That's going to go behind your first lien position. I'm guessing it doesn't take precedence. It's going to go behind it. But if you should decide to refinance, if you decide to take out a home equity loan, if you decide to take out a closed-end second, a home improvement loan, anything that has to do with financing, home loan financing has deed restriction rules. And so it could impact future financing on that home. And I think that probably wasn't shared with people.
I don't think so. I don't think it was shared with people. I should provide you. What I should do is find a copy of that letter and the deed restriction and send it over to you so you can kind of see it as well. It was pretty shocking, but there wasn't this explanation of, hey, you might want to go and get your lender's permission to do something like this. Hey, this may impact your future ability to get additional financing or secondary financing. Yeah. All sorts of stuff that it just wasn't there. And to that valuation issue, are we somehow, yes, I feel strongly about short-term rentals, but I also feel strongly about making money on my house and not having a deed restriction that shows up on a title report that a buyer could get, it could turn a buyer off. I don't know. I don't know. I'm sure there's people out there who feel that, limiting short-term rentals is good for the market. I don't know that I agree with that. I think that usually from the analysis I've read is actually the opposite. Short-term rentals actually sell for more and they raise the value of properties. So it's all over the map in terms of that, but I don't know that the city could get away with this. I mean, unless people let them.
Yeah. All right, let's shift gears a little bit. Let's move into the city of Phoenix and what upcoming changes are occurring with regard to short-term rentals in Phoenix.
Yeah, so there's two kind of primary things that the city has done. They recently amended their zoning code. And they recently amended their zoning code to allow for what are called accessory dwelling units. And they used some clever language in this zoning change. They call them accessory dwelling units. They shied away from the term guest house or guest home because ultimately there was language in this zoning change that prohibits the use of these ADUs for short-term rentals. So now what the city is doing is they're saying you have an automatic right to have an accessory dwelling unit or a casita or whatever you want to call it in your backyard or on your property. But what they've also done is they've included language that says, but you can't use it as a short-term rental. You can use it as a regular rental, but you can't use it as a short-term rental. And so some people in the short-term rental industry are like, well, wait a minute, isn't the city illegally regulating short-term rentals because they have a very narrow kicking lane to regulate short-term rentals, kind of like what Sedona is doing? Are they pushing the boundary here to see if somebody will challenge them? I don't know, but it was an interesting sort of inclusion into this ADU sort of grant of right that they're taking away the short-term rental part of that or the potential part of that. The city also came up. The second part of this is the city also came up with some new rules and regulations and ordinances. Very much like the city of Scottsdale, some of the other outlying Gilbert, some of the other outlying suburbs, they are now requiring that you obtain a license to have a short-term rental. You get that from the Maricopa County Assessor's Office. They're now requiring background checks. They're now requiring that somebody be available within a certain amount of time to respond to an emergency. So they're sort of getting in line with what other cities and towns near Phoenix have done. So that's probably a good thing. That doesn't seem to be, overly aggressive, whereas some of these other measures may be a little more aggressive than they're allowed to be.
Patrick, from a state standpoint, how is a short-term rental defined?
Basically, anything less than 30 days is a short-term rental.
All right. So less than 30 days means that if you're renting your house 30 days or more, then you can do whatever you want with it, provided that you're not breaking any other laws. Is that correct?
Yeah, basically at that point you're required. There's landlord-tenant obligations, and so you're fitting into this whole different statutory scheme. But basically, you're right. I mean, that's you're landlord now. You're a true landlord now, and you have a true landlord-tenant relationship. Whereas before, it's a little bit of a different relationship.
And so the city of Phoenix rolls out and says, hey, everybody, you can do ADUs, but you can't use it for short-term rentals. And if you already have a home in the city of Phoenix that has an ADU on it that you have been using as a short-term rental, what happens? Now you can't?
I don't know. And I don't know. That's a really good question. It seems to me that you're allowed to continue that use until such time as you sell the home, and the new buyer would be bound by the new city requirement. I think that you're probably allowed to continue that use until such time as you convey the property.
Okay. Because I mean, technically, you could be impacting somebody's revenue and their livelihood just by this one change in the law by the city of Phoenix, right? I mean, I
That's
can't
right.
imagine you're not grandfathered in if you have already been practicing and you have an ADU and it's a short-term rental, and maybe you've been doing that for years.
Yeah, the new legislation or the new zoning code seems to contemplate future going forward, casitas and guest homes.
Okay. All right. Well, Patrick, what keeps you up at night about all of this? I know something does.
Yeah, I don't know that the city can regulate short-term rentals in the way they've regulated this. I'm sure they had their city attorneys vet this and come up with their analysis, but I think ultimately, if something like this was tested, I don't know. I don't know that what the city of Sedona is doing, what the city of Phoenix is doing in terms of the deed restriction with the city of Sedona, in terms of the zoning kind of backdooring of short-term rental language. I don't know that those are totally above board. Again, somebody's going to have to challenge them on that. Otherwise, it's going to continue. But to me, those probably do not comport with the state laws that we have that basically say cities, towns, and municipalities, they can regulate short-term rentals, but really only health, safety, and those types of things. This seems to go a little bit too far. The other thing that keeps me up at night and others up at night are these phantom cancellations in terms of short-term rentals. We're talking short-term rentals here. Let's say you're an owner of a short-term rental and you wake up one morning and you try to log into your VRBO or your Airbnb account and it's locked. And then you get this letter that says, we've locked you out of your account because we're doing an investigation about your home and its safety because one of your guests complained. Well, this is happening a lot. And when I started talking and kind of researching myself, there are actually Reddit threads out there that basically tell somebody how to get a free stay in a short-term rental after you've stayed there. You get a refund of your money if you say, "Oh, I didn't feel safe. Oh, there was a hole in the fence and snakes could get through. I was fearful, or I saw." One was I saw a guy walking in his boxers 2 blocks away, and it bothered me. And they get their money back, and then the hosting companies, the booking companies, will lock you out pending an investigation. And so there's verbiage that people are using. It's wild. And so if you use the right verbiage according to the Reddit thread, then you might get a free stay. And so what we've had to do for people is get their accounts back open, because this is affecting future streams of business based on a bogus complaint. So it's unfortunate that that's happening.
Well, if you or somebody has run into this or has questions about the changes in short-term rentals, Patrick, obviously you have services available. And how do we reach you?
Yeah, sure. Phone number is 602-767-0050. Or P. McQueen at medalistlegal.com.
I have to tell you, I had a client that needed a real estate attorney that I referred to you not too long ago. And when she called me to thank me, she said, "Oh my gosh, he's so nice." Like, what, nice an attorney? I guess, I don't know. Does that not work? I'm like, he's a good guy. So if you need help, I'm sure that Patrick can at least listen and give you some guidance. Patrick, thank you so much just for bringing your knowledge and your expertise and guidance to our community.
Yeah, my pleasure. Happy to do it anytime.
All right. Bye, everybody.